Hello, creative and crafty people. I hope y'all are doing well today. In this video, I'm going to show you how I created these fun yet simple copper wire earrings. I'll be using copper wire to make my earrings, but if you'd like to make your piece unique, you can also use any wire, such as silver, gold, or even platinum. There are many different types of wire out there. There is even colored wire, so there are many possibilities. I use copper wire for its cost effectiveness and its ease of use, especially if I'm just practicing. So as we get ready to create these earrings, remember, this is your creation and you get to create it the way you like it. If you'd like to learn how I created these super cute earrings, then stick around and let's get creating. To create these earrings, you're going to need some 18 gauge wire, 2 pieces cut at 7.6 centimeters, 1 piece cut at 4 centimeters, 2 pieces cut at 2.5 centimeters. You're also going to need some 20 gauge wire, 4 pieces cut at 2.5 centimeters, 2 pieces cut at 4.5 centimeters. You're going to need some chain nose pliers, bent chain nose pliers, looping pliers, flush cutters, a chasing hammer, a bench block, a cup burr, and this is called a cup burr because it has this little tiny little cup on the end of it that files the ends of your wires, or you can just use a file. This concludes the materials you'll need to create these earrings. If you didn't catch or you missed something in this materials list, you can either go back and rewatch this part of the video, or you can check out the materials list in the description down below. Now let's get started on this project. Now to start this project, we're going to grab our 18 gauge wires, the 2 pieces cut at 7.6 centimeters in length. And we're going to place one of those down, and then we're going to grab our looping pliers. We're going to take the tail end of our wire and wrap it around this 7mm mandrel here. So we're grabbing that tail end like that, flush in between the 7 and 9mm barrel. And then we're going to wrap this wire around that barrel. And we're going to continue wrapping around past the tail end of that wire. We're going to make 2 rings here. So we're going to go around more than 2 times. So you'll see here in just a minute, there's that tail end again. And we're going to go past that tail end about by 0.5 centimeters past that tail end. And there you can see we've gotten that far. And we're just going to pull this off of our looping pliers. And now you can see we've got a small coil here. And this little end is not quite curved enough, so I'm going to clip off the end of that with my flush cutters with the flush side facing the rings. And there you can see it is nice and curved at the end there to match up behind it. And now we're going to flip those flush cutters around and have the flush cut facing the ring that we're about to cut off. And there you have the both ends of that wire are flush cut, nice and flat, like that. And now we're going to cut the other ring, just like we did the first one. So here you can see that little point at the end. That was the other side of the flush cutters. And so now we're going to take the flush side and snip off that little point, like so. And see how that's nice and flush there. And now we're going to flip these flush cutters over, and we're going to flush cut the other side of this ring right up against that first cut we made. Like so. And that just leaves us with a tiny bit of leftover there. We needed enough that we could grab to pull around. And there you can see we got a nice perfect little ring. And now we're going to grab our other 18 gauge wire cut at 7.6 centimeters. And we're going to grab our looping pliers. And this time we are going to wrap around the 9mm barrel. So placing the tail end of this wire between the 7 and 9mm barrels, I'm going to wrap the wire around that 9mm barrel. And again, just like we did the last time, we're going to wrap around a total of 2 times and slightly pass. So here we're going past that tail end and we're continuing to wrap until we come back around the second time. And then we're just going to push a little bit past, so about a ½ centimeter past the tail end. And this pretty much uses up all of that wire, as you can see here. And then again, you can see the little tail end of that wire is not exactly rounded with the end of that. So it's going to poke up a little bit there, and we don't want that when we make our loop or our ring. So we're going to flush cut the end of this wire right here. We're going to snip off a little end of that. And now you can see how it's just nice and flush there. And now we're going to flip the flush cutters over and cut that little ring off with our flush cutters and the flush side facing the ring. So now we have 2 flush cut ends on that ring. Just like that. And on the other end is that funny little point from the opposite side of the flush cutter. So we need to cut that off to start our next ring. So we're going to cut that little point off with the flush cut facing our ring. Like so. And then flipping our flush cutters the opposite direction, we're going to flush cut the other side of our ring, right up against the original cut we made here. And now we've got that ring all finished nice. So now we're going to grab our chain nose plier and our bent chain nose pliers. And this is where we're going to close these jump rings we made. So grabbing each of those pliers on each side of the ring, we're going to twist the ring open a little bit more. And then we're going to twist it back and past that first side and back and past, and then right up to where we want it to line up. We want to line those 2 ends right up with each other. The reason you go back and forth like that is it work hardens your rings. It also helps to line those rings up just where you want them. So here we go. We're going to do it on this second one. We're going past, back past, and then we're going to bring it right up there. And you can do that as many times as you need to get that to line up just perfectly. And there you can see it's perfectly lined up. You can almost not see where those 2 ends join. Now, after doing all 4 of those rings, we're going to place the ring on the bench block and give this a few whacks with our chasing hammer. This will also harden the wire even more, as well as flatten the wire a bit. I like to flatten it because then it gives us a little bit of a shine. Now, when you're doing this, the ring will pull apart. And as you can see, it's got a little space there. So now we're going to pull those ends back together just the same way we did just a moment ago. So we're going to twist those wires back and forth until we can get them to line back up with each other. And there you can see almost. There we go. Perfectly lined up. And here you can see how those line up together and the nice little shine that we get from the light reflecting off of that flat surface of these rings. And all 4 of them have been complete off camera. And now we're going to grab a piece of that 4 centimeter 18 gauge wire. And with my looping pliers, I am going to create a coil around the 2 millimeter barrel. So grabbing the tail end of that wire, I'm going to start wrapping it around that 2 millimeter barrel. And I'm going to bring it so that it goes past that tail end of the wire, just like we did earlier with the larger rings. And we're going to continue wrapping around because we want to make a few of these rings. So there you can see I've got 2 full rings made and slightly past that. And so here you can see I got a little coil going. And with my flush cutters, I'm going to make a flush cut at the end of this wire, like so, just like we did with the larger ones. And then we're going to flip those flush cutters, and we're going to cut the other side of this ring flush. And there you can see the first of the jump rings. And now we're going to make a second one to go with the second earring. So again, we're going to, you can see that little funny point there, so we want to flush cut that off. So we're going to grab the flush cutters with the flush cut facing the ring, the flush cut side. We're going to snip that little end off. And there you can see that nice flush surface there. You can see that shine picking up. And now we're going to flip our flush cutters so that the flat side is facing, or the flush side is facing the ring that we're going to cut off. And snip that little ring. And there you can see we've got the second one done. And next we're going to get ready to attach these 2 rings together. So grabbing that small little jump ring in our bent chain nose pliers and our regular chain nose pliers on either side of the ring, we're going to twist this wire open to the side. Never pull them out. You'll misshape your ring. Always twist it to the side. Then we're going to pop our 2 rings on there, like so. And then grabbing either side of this little bitty jump ring, we're going to twist that jump ring back into place. So I'm going to grab, and then I'm going to twist it back past the point of connection. And as I'm doing that, I'm slowly pushing those ends together until they meet up with each other. And then they'll meet up just perfectly like that. And there you can see how they've joined together. And now when we separate these rings out, you can see the beginnings of our earring. We've basically, in a sense, made a chain with 3 different size rings. Now we're going to grab our 2 pieces of 18 gauge wire that were cut at 2.5 centimeters each, place one of those wires off to the side with the other earring parts. And we're just going to hold on to the one, and we're going to grab our looping pliers. And with the 2 millimeter barrel, we are going to make a loop with this small 2.5 centimeter wire. We're going to wrap that wire around till the tail end of that wire comes around and meets back up with itself. So we're making a loop at the end of this wire. Now we're going to readjust these looping pliers until we can turn it no longer. So we're going to turn it so that this wire is facing downward like so. And then we're going to bend that wire straight down so that it comes straight down the middle of the post there of that 2 millimeter barrel. And there you can see how that is. And then we've made a little head pin here. And we are going to do that again with our next wires. So we're grabbing the 20 gauge wire, the 4 pieces cut at 2.5 centimeters in length. We're going to set 2 of those up aside for the other earring. And we're going to keep a hold of these 2 pieces that were cut at 2.5 centimeters. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to make a loop with both wires together. So grabbing at the 2 millimeter mandrel, we're going to wrap those 2 wires together all the way around so that the tail end of those wires meet back up with itself. Make sure you hold them right there together or they're going to be off. And I had little troubles there holding that together, as you can see, but I ended up getting it right in the end. Then we're going to turn those wires down until you can't turn it anymore. And then bend those wires straight down so that you have a nice little line coming straight down, and that line basically intersects your 2 millimeter barrel. And then you have 2 perfect little head pins there. Now we're getting the bench block out and our chasing hammer, and we're just going to hammer the heads of these head pins. We just want to make sure those are nice and firm. And then because when you hammer these, they do splay out a little bit, we're going to put them back on the looping plier and wrap that nice and tight, just like so. And then taking this head pin, here you can see you can see the loop this way, but we're going to turn it so that that loop faces up and down on this bench block, like so. That way, when we hammer out this wire, we're going to hammer it so it's perpendicular to that head pin. So here you can see I'm going to hammer that wire out away from the end of that wire. So you can see that motion. I'm going from left to right as I hammer. And that just splays that wire out toward the end of that wire. And here you can see how we've got a little paddle at the end of this wire now. And that is the goal, to make a nice little paddle. And now we're going to grab the other 2 head pins that we created together. And we're going to hammer the heads of those head pins, like so. And again, those splay out a little. So we're going to grab our looping pliers. And we're going to make sure we go ahead and just tighten up those loops a little bit. There's one and there's the other one. I'm going to tighten this one up just a little bit more. There we go. And there you can see those are nice and tightened up now. And now these 3 wires are actually all the same length at this point. So I'm going to show that to you here. So the paddle wire and the 2 wires we haven't done anything with, the head pins. And I want to shorten these. So I want to shorten them about 1/2 centimeter because we want them to be a little shorter on either side of that longer paddle. So I'm going to grab my ruler here. And I'm going to take these wires and I'm going to place them at the end of this ruler. And at about the 1/2 centimeter mark, I'm going to place the end of my wires on that 1/2 centimeter mark. And with my thumb, I'm going to mark right where it goes to the 0 mark on there. So we just want to snip off 1/2 centimeter of these wires. Just like so. And now we've got 2 identical head pins, tiny little head pins. And we are going to hammer paddles into these 2 pieces, just as we did that longer one. So again, we can place that on there, but we don't want the loop side facing up. We want it to be perpendicular, like so. And then we're going to grab that chasing hammer and we're going to hammer out to the side like this. We're going to go toward the right, hammer toward the right. If you're left-handed, you'll probably do it the opposite direction. And here is our little paddle. We're going to do the same thing on this final piece. Again, hammering it out to the side, away from the loop, like so. And now we've got a paddle on all 3 of those pieces. Now we want to go ahead and file the ends of these. They are all just a little bit sharp and jagged, so we need to use the file to file down those ends to make them nice and smooth. And I like to make them into a little teardrop shape at the end of that paddle, or rounded around the end there. So there you can see that's nice and rounded. And we do the same thing with all three off camera. And now grabbing my chain nose pliers, I'm going to open the loop on the longest paddle. I'm just going to call them paddles because I don't know what else to call them. And so now we're going to open that jump ring, or that ring at the end of that paddle, and we're going to place that onto the larger of the rings that we have connected together there. And then again, we're going to twist that loop closed. And then we've got our first little paddle on the end of our ring. And now we're going to grab one of the shorter paddles and open that ring, twisting it to the side, not pulling it away from itself. Always twist it to the side. And then we're going to place that paddle on one of the sides of the original one we put on there, and then twist that loop back into place to close that back up. And there you can see we've got the shorter one next to the longer one. And then we want to place this last one on the opposite side of the longer one. So again, twist that loop out to the side to open it. And then we're going to place this on the opposite side. I was having a little trouble getting a hold of it there. And now we're going to close that loop back up. Now you can make more of these little paddles and then just make your next two another 1/2 centimeter shorter than the first two. And you can kind of have a little bit wider of an area at the bottom of this larger circle with about 5 of those paddles if you'd rather. But there is the completed one side of the earring without the ear wire. So now we're going to grab our 220 gauge wires, cut at 4.5 centimeters each. And we're going to take both of these wires and we're going to form the ear wires together. So making sure that those ends line up perfectly even with each other, we're going to grab the looping pliers. And with the 2 millimeter barrel, we're going to grab the end of these wires and create a loop. We're going to take the tail end of those wires and wrap them all the way around until those ends meet back up with itself. Just like so. And then we're going to take those wires off of the looping pliers, and there you can see those loops on there. And we're going to place those loops between the 7 and the 9 millimeter barrel. And the loops are going to face the 7 millimeter barrel, like so. And then we're going to take the tail end and wrap it around the 9 millimeter barrel, all the way around until it's about 1/2 centimeter away from the loops. So there you can see there's about 1/2 centimeter. Then we're going to pull the ear wires off of the looping pliers. And then we're going to make sure the ends of these ear wires line up just perfect with each other, like so. And then grabbing my chain nose pliers, I'm going to grab at about 2 millimeters from the ends of these wires and then give them a little bend away from the loops, like so. And there you can see we've got our basic shape of our ear wires. And now I like to add a little flair to these. So I'm going to grab my bench block and this outside edge of the ear wire, the part that faces the front of the ear that you see, and this side is the side that you don't see behind the ear. So this front side, we're going to hammer this. So So I'm going to hammer that out away from the part that goes in your ear. As well as that loop, we want to harden that loop. And there you can see it picks up a nice little shine on the side there. And this other side stays round. So when you put it in the ear, it's nice and round and not squared off. We don't want to put a square peg in a round hole. And then grabbing our cut burr, we're going to round off the end of this ear wire. So that little cut burr has a cup on the end of it, and you place that over the end of the wire and just twist that cut burr back and forth, and that just files off the little burr at the end of your wire, or that little jagged edge, and rounds off that wire nicely. If you don't have a cut burr, you can just use a regular file to do this. It takes a little bit longer, but you can definitely use a file. And there you can see that nice rounded wire there at the end. And you're going to do that to both ear wires. And now with my chain nose pliers, I am going to bend this loop on the ear wire out to the side. Remember, to the side, not forward. You'll misshape your little loop. Now you're going to take that little loop from the ear wire and thread that through the smaller of the loops on your chain for the earring. And then we're going to twist this back into shape on your ear wire there. And there you can see our completed earring. Isn't that just fun? And you can add those 2 paddles if you'd like to make it look more full. You can do all sorts of things with this. You can even add a bead in the centers of those circles, whatever you'd like to do. I hope y'all enjoyed watching this video. Let me know in the comments below what you thought. Would you do something different? Maybe add to this design? Would you use different wire? Did you like this project? I'd really like to hear your feedback, whether it's positive or constructive. Also, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. This just lets YouTube know that you enjoyed my content, and in turn, YouTube will push these videos out to even more creative people like yourself. If you haven't already and you'd like to see more of my tutorials, then click that subscribe button. It's free. And by subscribing to my channel, you can be notified when a new tutorial is up for you to view. Thank you guys for your continued support. I sure do appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next Thursday.